Okay, so, have you ever been stuck in traffic, looked at the car next to you, and thought, you know what, I could build something better than this? In my shed, with motorcycle parts, by myself. Most people think that thought, laugh at themselves, and order a pizza instead. One Frenchman actually did it. Meet the 1955 Grataloup. Not a brand, not a production model, not the result of a boardroom meeting or a venture capital pitch. Just one man, one shed, one vision, and probably the most spectacularly stubborn act of personal transportation in the history of the French Republic. This is its story. Postwar France, 1955. The country is rebuilding. Citroëns are everywhere. The Isetta has just arrived from Italy. The Messerschmitt is buzzing around German streets like an angry tin can. Sensible, budget-conscious Europeans are queuing up to buy whatever small, affordable microcar they can get their hands on. And then there's Monsieur Grataloup. Living in the Pyrenean town of Bagnères-de-Bigorre, a beautiful mountain town in the southwest of France, the kind of place where the air is clean, the wine is good, and apparently the local automotive standards are entirely negotiable, Monsieur Grataloup looked at all those production microcars and reached a very specific conclusion. Why buy one when you can build one? He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't a manufacturer. He wasn't trying to start a company or disrupt an industry or become famous. He just needed to get around. And he had motorcycle parts and time and the particular variety of Pyrenean stubbornness that once built cathedrals and would now, apparently, build a three-wheeled microcar in a shed. So that's exactly what he did. The result was a fully functioning, daily driven, three-wheeled microcar that he used regularly around town. Up hills, through markets, past confused neighbors who presumably had many questions but were too polite to ask all of them at once. And here's the remarkable part, it was legal. It had license plates, Department 64, Pyrenees Atlantiques. The French state looked at whatever Monsieur Grataloup had constructed in his shed, evaluated it against their road regulations, and said, yes, that's a car, off you go. Which either says a great deal about the quality of what he built or a great deal about 1955 French bureaucracy. Possibly both. Let's talk about what's actually under, or rather, beside the bodywork. Because the Grataloup doesn't follow rules about where engines are supposed to go. Power comes from a 247 cubic centimeters Villiers two-stroke single-cylinder engine. Air-cooled. About 7.5 horsepower. Originally from a British motorcycle, possibly a pre-war BSA, and mounted directly beside the driver. Not behind. Not up front. Right there next to you at elbow height, running, hot, and smelling exactly like a two-stroke British motorcycle engine smells. So if you were sitting in the Grataloup, you weren't sitting next to a passenger. You were sitting next to the engine. It was your co-pilot, your travel companion, and your hand warmer all in one. The engine connected to a 3-speed gearbox reportedly sourced from a René Gillett motorcycle, Via, and this is where things get beautifully honest, chains. Not fancy engineering. Not a shaft drive. Chains. The kind you grease regularly and pray about the rest of the time. The clutch was 3 leather belts running between the engine and transmission. Not friction discs. Not hydraulics. Leather. Belts. When life gives you scrap, you don't make lemonade. You make a drivetrain. Starting the engine deserves its own paragraph. Most Villiers units were kick-started, because that's what you did in 1955. You kicked things until they woke up. Not this one. Grataloup rigged up an electric starter connected to the engine via a leather strap. You pressed a button. The strap spun. And if the stars were aligned and the Pyrenean gods were feeling generous, the engine sputtered to life like a sleepy accordion at the wrong end of a village festival. The chassis was hand-built from steel tubing. No blueprints. No CAD software. No crash testing. Just tubes, angles, intuition, and presumably a measuring tape used more as a suggestion than a rule. It used a tadpole layout, 2 wheels up front, 1 at the rear. Suspension was leaf springs, transverse at the front and longitudinal at the back. Simple, robust, and perfectly suited to the gravel roads and mountain lanes of rural southwestern France. The wheels were larger than most microcars of the era, bigger than the tiny 8 or 10-inch wheels found on an Isetta or Messerschmitt. This gave the Grataloup an immediate practical advantage on rough surfaces. While other microcars were bouncing off cobblestones like panicked rubber balls, the Grataloup was rolling through with the quiet dignity of a vehicle that had nothing to prove and everything to gain. Total length, about 8 feet. Width, about 52 inches. Curb weight, approximately 175 kilograms. You could almost park it in a large wardrobe. Almost. Inside is doing some work here. There was a seat, a steering wheel, a small windshield, and a fabric roof you could erect if it started raining or if you simply wanted to feel fancy. Technically a 2-seater layout. Realistically, a 1-seater with a hot, noisy British engine where the passenger would otherwise sit. Top speed, approximately 45 miles per hour. Some accounts optimistically suggest 52. Those accounts are probably describing a downhill stretch with a strong tailwind after skipping breakfast. It worked. Every day. Rain, shine, market day, mountain road. It didn't explode. It didn't disintegrate. It just ran. Visually, the Grataloup had the charm of something sketched by a very talented 6-year-old and then brought into existence by someone who completely respected the brief. Rounded nose. Flared front fenders. A tail that looked gently borrowed from a pedal car. Green paint, cheerful, unapologetic green. The kind of green that says I built this myself and I'm delighted about it. It radiated personality. It had proportions that were simultaneously compact and confident. If a frog and a roadster had a child together, and that child grew up in the mountains of southwestern France and developed a strong work ethic, it would look exactly like this. After its years of daily use, the Grataloup ended up in a Citroën garage. Not as a display piece. Not celebrated. Just parked. Forgotten. Gathering dust in the corner while actual Citroëns came and went around it. Then, somehow, it surfaced. Then it crossed the Atlantic. Then, in 2013, it appeared at the RM Auctions sale of the Bruce Wiener Microcar Museum, the largest microcar collection ever assembled, and sold for $34,500. Adjusted for today, that's around $45,000. For a one-off hand-built, shed-sourced French 3-wheeler powered by a leather belt and good intentions. Today, the Grataloup lives at the Lane Motor Museum in Nashville, Tennessee. A place that collects exactly this kind of thing, the misfits, the oddities, the one-offs that fell through the cracks of automotive history. The little French trike sits among bubble cars and forgotten experiments like a philosopher at a party. Quietly confident, entirely at peace with what it is. Total production run, 1. Total surviving examples, 1. The same one. Here's the thing about cars like the Grataloup. We spent a lot of time celebrating the cars that changed industries, broke lap records, and sold 1 million units. The Ferraris, the Minis, the Beetles, the machines that defined eras. But sometimes the most interesting car in the room is the one built by a single person in a mountain town with motorcycle parts and zero interest in what anyone else thought about it. The Grataloup didn't change the world. It didn't race at Le Mans. It didn't inspire a generation of designers. It just carried one Frenchman around Bagnères-de-Bigorre for however many years, reliably, cheerfully, on chains and leather belts, and sheer stubbornness. And now it's in a museum in Tennessee, and you're watching a video about it 70 years later, which suggests that being entirely yourself, even in a shed in the Pyrenees with a British motorcycle engine bolted beside your left elbow, is a perfectly valid way to leave a mark. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. And remember, never underestimate a Frenchman with a wrench, a vision, and absolutely nothing to lose.